The most exhausting thing I ever did was pretend. Not in any one dramatic moment, but across thousands of ordinary ones. Pretending I was fine when I was not. Pretending to agree with things I did not believe. Pretending to be comfortable in a version of my life I had built carefully to look exactly right from the outside, while the inside slowly got very, very quiet. I'm telling you this because you need to understand what kind of man I was before a Saturday morning in October, when a woman at the Natchitoches farmers market told me I was supposed to look away. My name is Marcus Webb. I am 36 years old. I run a small boat repair and marine outfitting shop on the Cane River, and I have lived in Natchitoches, Louisiana my whole life except for 4 years I spent at college in Baton Rouge and then immediately came back from, because I already knew where home was. I am not what most people would call complicated. I fix things that are broken, put them back in the water, and try to be honest about what I can and cannot repair. That last part I learned late. I got married at 28 to a woman named Dana, who was good and kind and patient in ways I did not always deserve. We tried for 4 years. Not at saving the marriage, we were never dramatic enough for that. We tried at being happy inside it, which turned out to be a harder problem than either of us anticipated. The trouble was that we were both performing. Not maliciously. Not strategically. Just because performing had become so habitual for each of us that we had both forgotten what was underneath it. We were pleasant to each other at dinner. We were the kind of couple that showed up correctly at social events. We were what people meant when they used the word solid. By year 3, solid was the only thing left. The divorce was not a falling apart. It was a quiet acknowledgement of what had already become true. Dana said during the last real conversation we ever had that she did not think either of us knew how to just be. She was not wrong. She was not being cruel. She was the most honest she had been in probably 2 years, and I respected her for it and was sad that it had taken this long for either of us to say it out loud. I moved back into my house alone in the spring of my 32nd year, and I made a decision. No more performing. Not with clients who wanted me to tell them their boat was in better shape than it was. Not with acquaintances who asked how I was doing and wanted fine rather than the truth. Not with the friends who meant well and kept inviting me to things so I could meet someone, as though the problem had been a shortage of rooms. If I thought something, I would say it. If I wanted something, I would not hide it behind irony or indifference, or the carefully cultivated appearance of not minding. If I looked at something, or someone, I would look, and I would not pretend I was not. It sounded simple. It turned out to be the most disruptive decision I had made in my adult life. People are not accustomed to men who mean what they say and say what they mean. Who look directly at the things they want to look at without manufacturing plausible deniability. Who do not perform nonchalance as a form of social grace. Some conversations ended faster than they would have otherwise. Some people were made uncomfortable by the absence of the usual social performance. The way a room feels strange when the background music you stopped noticing is suddenly turned off. A client asked me once why I was telling him the truth about the condition of his engine instead of just fixing what he could afford and letting him discover the rest later the way it usually went. I told him because I had been in the business of telling people what they wanted to hear for too long and I was done with it. He looked at me like I had said something in a foreign language. Then he thanked me and paid for the full repair. A woman at a get-together a friend had organized, good intentions, obvious setup, asked me what I was looking for. I told her honestly. She said that was refreshing, and then moved across the room and spent the rest of the evening talking to someone else, which was fine. Honest was not always convenient. I had decided that was not my problem to manage. I stopped apologizing for things that were true. I stopped pretending that the things I noticed were not being noticed. I stopped, in short, performing a version of Marcus Webb that was easier for other people to be around than the actual one. It was, I would come to understand, the best and most lasting thing the marriage had given me. 4 years of watching us both disappear behind the performance of ourselves, and then the hard and clarifying quiet of what was left when the performance finally stopped. I brought that clarity with me to the Natchitoches farmers market on a Saturday in October, and I looked at a woman I had no intention of pretending not to be looking at. And it changed everything. I had been going to that market since August. Every Saturday, 10 to noon. The parking lot behind the old brick buildings on Front Street filling up with vendors, and the slow, unhurried crowd that has nowhere particular to be and moves accordingly. I went for the tomatoes from Crew Farm, and the coffee from an old man who drove down from Shreveport every week, and ground his own beans, and had strong opinions about everything, and was correct about most of it. I did not notice Celeste Broussard's stand the first 2 weeks. The third week I did. She was restacking a row of amber jars at the back of her display when I walked past, and she looked up the way people do when they sense someone in their space. She had dark eyes, and a stillness about her that was not the same as being quiet. It was the stillness of someone paying close attention to things. She nodded once, the polite acknowledgement of a vendor to a passing foot traffic stranger, and I kept walking. I thought about that nod on the drive home. About the stillness. I came back the next Saturday and bought a jar of wildflower honey and a small jar of fig preserves. She counted out my change efficiently and asked if I had been to the market before. I said a few times. She mentioned it had been a slow morning and hoped the afternoon would pick up. I said I hoped so too. I paid and left. The honey sat on my kitchen shelf for a week. I used none of it. I was too honest with myself to pretend I had bought it for the honey. I came back the week after that. And the week after that, I always bought something from her stand. A jar of this, a small container of that, and we always exchanged a few words. Nothing significant. The courteous arithmetic of two people who do not fully know each other yet, but are beginning to occupy the same small, regular corner of each other's awareness. She was warm, but contained, the way someone is when they have learned to be pleasant without opening a door they have not yet decided about. I noticed things. The way she kept her display organized to a logic I could almost but not quite work out. The way she handled a difficult customer, a man who wanted to return a jar he had dropped and broken, insisting that the jar had been defective, with a patience that was genuine rather than performed, the kind that comes from actually not being bothered rather than from deciding not to show it. The way she sometimes looked at something in the middle distance when there was a gap between customers, like she was checking in with some interior calculation that she ran regularly. I looked. I did not pretend otherwise. By the 5th week I understood that she had noticed me noticing. The small signs of it. The way she would glance up a half second before I reached her stand, as though she had sensed me coming down the row. The way she would hold eye contact just a moment longer than the transaction required, before returning her attention to the display. She was watching to see what I did with the looking, whether I would do something with it or continue to perform indifference, which was the expected thing, the comfortable thing, the thing that kept everyone in their lanes and required nothing from anybody. I did not push. But I did not pretend either. I bought my jar, I thanked her, and I left. And I came back. It was that Saturday in October. Gray sky, cool for Louisiana, the market quieter than usual. A few canopies had not bothered coming out, when she had apparently had enough of the not pushing. I was standing at the hot sauce stand next to hers, looking at a display of bottles I had no intention of purchasing, when I felt her watching me the way I had been watching her. I turned. She was leaning with one hand on the edge of her table, arms crossed, and she was looking at me with an expression I could not fully read. Half amusement, half something sharper and more direct. She said, "You're supposed to look away." I looked at her for one moment. "I quit pretending long ago," I said. She was quiet. Not the polite quiet of someone who does not know what to say. The quiet of someone recalibrating. She had handed me the standard social exit, the cue to perform embarrassment, to laugh it off and look at the hot sauce, to let the moment dissolve into something comfortable and forgettable. And I had declined it, and now she was deciding what that meant about me. She said, "How long is long?" I said, 4 years, give or take. "What were you pretending before that?" "That I was not paying attention to what I was actually paying attention to." A beat. "And now?" Now I'm standing here, I said, which should be self-explanatory. She considered me. Her expression shifted, not quite a smile, something more deliberate than that. The look of someone deciding whether to file something into a category that was already full or to leave the classification open for now. She said, "Buy something or move out of the way, Webb. You're blocking my sightline." I said, "You know my name." She said, "Theo told me." She nodded toward a stand 2 places down the row, a large man in a blue cap sorting sweet potatoes, who raised one hand without looking up. "My brother. He said you fixed his boat last spring." I said that was right. A 1987 Grady White with a cracked hull and a motor that had been rebuilt incorrectly by 2 different shops before it came to me. He said you told him it would take 3 weeks. I said, it had taken 3 weeks. He said you told him the truth about what was wrong with it before you told him what it would cost to fix. I said I tried not to tell people things I did not mean. Another beat. She was looking at me with the same focused attention she gave to her jars. "I'm Celeste," she said. I said, "I know. It's on the sign." She looked at the sign. She looked back at me. And something that was almost a smile got through, brief and genuine, before she arranged her expression back to neutral. "Buy something or move," she said again. I bought 2 jars of sourwood honey and a jar of blackberry preserves, and stepped clear of her stand. She turned back to restacking. I walked to the coffee stand and held a cup I was not paying attention to, and thought about the expression on her face when I had declined to perform the embarrassment she had offered me. Something had briefly opened in it, surprise, or something that surprise had turned into, before she had brought her expression back to the composed and careful face she showed the market. I thought about that on the drive home. And that evening. And most of the next morning. Theo Broussard found me the following Saturday before the market opened. I was staking a canopy I had borrowed to shade a generator I was running diagnostics on, when he walked over with his hands in his jacket pockets, and the measured look of a man who had made up his mind to say something, and intended to say it efficiently. "You have been here every Saturday for 2 months," he said. I said that was right. "And you buy from her stand every time." I said the honey was good. "The honey," he said, "is excellent." "That is not what I am asking about." I set the steak mallet down and looked at him directly. The way I had learned was the only useful way to have a conversation that mattered. "Then ask what you are actually asking," I said. He looked at me. He was doing the same calibration his sister did, checking not for the right words but for what was under them. "Celeste has been disappointed before," he said, not in a small way, in a way that took a long time to come back from, and I watched all of it. I am not interested in watching it again. I said I understood that. She is careful now. Very careful. He paused, the kind of careful that looks like fine from the outside and is not fine underneath. I know what that looks like from the inside, I said. Do you? I spent 4 years married to a woman we were both performing for, including ourselves. We were so good at the performance that we had each convinced ourselves it was real until it was not anymore. I know exactly what fine looks like when it has stopped being true. He studied me for a long time. He was not looking for eloquence. He had heard eloquent things said on behalf of his sister before, by men who were very good at saying the right thing and significantly less good at meaning it. He was looking for something underneath. "What do you want from her?" he said. I thought about the jar on my kitchen shelf. The first one, the wildflower honey from the 3rd Saturday, still sitting there, unopened, because I was too honest with myself to throw it away or to pretend the reason I had bought it was anything other than what it was. "I do not want anything from her," I said. "I want to know her. There is a difference." He held my eye for a long time. Then he nodded once. "Do not make it complicated," he said. "She does not need complicated. She needs someone who says what he means." "That is the only way I know how to do it anymore," I said. He picked up his canopy pole and walked back to his stand. It was the most efficient conversation I had had in years, and I respected him for it entirely. I thought about what he had said for most of that week. The part about her being the kind of careful that looks fine from the outside. I recognized that description. I had been that kind of careful myself, for longer than I wanted to think about, and the specific loneliness of it, of being perfectly fine in every observable way while something real was absent, was not something I was willing to cause in someone else now that I understood what it cost. So I continued exactly what I had been doing. I showed up on Saturdays. I bought from her stand. I said what I meant and did not perform anything different from what I was. I did not rush it, and I did not manufacture pressure, and I did not treat patience as a strategy. Because patience as a strategy is just another performance. I was patient because there was nowhere else I wanted to be on a Saturday morning, and nothing I needed the situation to become by a particular date. 2 weeks after the conversation with Theo, she handed me my change and held eye contact a second or two longer than usual, and said, "You are the most straightforward person I have ever met at a farmer's market." I said I was probably the most straightforward person she would meet anywhere. She almost smiled. "That might be a problem," she said. I said I did not see why. She said she would think about it. The next Saturday she bought 2 cups of the Shreveport man's coffee without asking, and set one on the edge of her stand for me, and went back to her display, and I understood that she had thought about it. 3 weeks after that, Celeste suggested coffee on Front Street after the market closed. She said it with the directness I was beginning to understand was her natural register. "If you are going to show up here every Saturday, we might as well talk like adults." I said yes before she finished the sentence. She told me about him over that first cup. 3 years with a man named Daniel who was articulate and present, and in the first year, exactly what he had appeared to be. By the second year she had come to understand that what he was attentive to was whether she was seeing him correctly, not whether he was seeing her at all. He said the right things with great skill. He knew exactly when to say them. She had believed for a long time that this was what honesty looked like, the thing she had been waiting for, the real attention she had wanted someone to pay to her. It took her too long to understand that saying the right thing at the right moment is a technique, and that some people use it as a substitute for meaning anything. She told me she had tried to name it for a long time without knowing what she was naming. The feeling of being looked at without being seen. Of being heard without being listened to. Of someone tracking carefully whether you were happy with them without caring much about whether you were actually happy. She said she had made excuses for it for 2 years, because she had invested 2 years, and because he was always able to say the thing that made her feel like maybe she was asking for too much. "He looked at me the way you look at a mirror," she said. "To check if everything is right. Not to actually see what is there." I said, "How did you finally know?" She turned her cup slowly on the table. A long pause. "He told me once that I was the most important person in his life." She said it quietly. And I realized I believed him. And I also realized that did not mean he actually knew me. That those two things could both be true at the same time. That he could need me completely and still not see me at all. She looked at her cup. That was when I knew. She looked back up at me. "He never looked at me the way you look at me." She said it flatly, as a piece of evidence. Not as a compliment. "When I caught you at the market that first time, before I said anything, I thought, that is what it is supposed to feel like. Someone actually looking." I had been so long without it I had stopped knowing what it felt like. I sat with that for a moment. "I need to tell you something," I said. She waited. "I have the first jar I bought from your stand, still on my kitchen shelf. Still unopened. I have had it there for 2 months. She looked at me. "I kept it because I am too honest with myself to pretend I bought it for the honey." She was quiet, looking at me with the same expression she had used at the market when I declined the exit she had offered, the look of someone deciding whether to leave a category open or seal it. Her fingers were still around her cup. She did not look away. "That is either strange or honest," she said. "Probably both." She thought about it. "Both is all right," she said. A pause. "I am out of practice," she said then, in a quieter voice. at trusting that a face means what it says. Daniel was very good at the face. I read him as carefully as I knew how to for 3 years, and I was still wrong about what I was reading. I do not trust my own judgment the way I used to. That is fair, I said. I am not asking you to prove anything. I am telling you where I am. I know where you are, I said. I am not going anywhere. She held my eye. Then she said, "All right." We sat at that table until the calf started stacking chairs around us. The months that followed had the quality of real things. No performances, no grand gestures, no moments designed to be impressive. She came to the shop one afternoon and watched me work for an hour without saying much. A compression fitting I was fabricating for an old inboard whose parts were no longer made. And she had a small notebook and wrote things in it that she did not explain, and I did not ask about. Because when she was ready, she would tell me. She told me 2 weeks later. She had been writing down the names of the tools and what they did. She wanted to understand the work. I thought about that for a long time. We walked the Cane River on Sunday mornings when neither of us had anything scheduled. She knew the names of the birds, not as a hobby, she just knew them, the way you know things you have paid attention to for years without announcing that you have. She told me about the purple gallinule without me asking, and then said, slightly self-conscious, that most people did not particularly want to know about the purple gallinule. I said I did. She told me everything she knew about it, which was considerable. One Tuesday in November, she reorganized my spice cabinet while I made rice, and told me the way I had it arranged was philosophically indefensible. I said I did not have a philosophy about spice cabinets. She said that was exactly the problem. I asked her what the philosophy should be. She told me, in specific and logical detail, and she was completely right, and I reorganized it the way she said, and it has been that way since. I made her laugh 3 times that evening. Not the polite kind, the genuine kind that surprised her on its way out, that she covered briefly with her hand before she let it go. The first time it happened, she looked almost startled by herself. By the 3rd time, she let it out clean, without the hand, without the automatic self-correction. Each one felt like something recovered from a place she had put it away carefully and stopped visiting. There was an evening in December when she was quiet in a way that had nothing to do with me, and everything to do with something that had happened at work. A situation she worked through slowly at my kitchen table while I worked on a parts order and did not push her. Because I had learned that her quiet was not a wall, but a workspace. When she was done working through it, she said so, said what the conclusion was, and asked what I thought. I told her. She considered it and said I was right about part of it and wrong about another part, and explained why. She was right. We ate dinner. That was the whole evening. Afterward, I thought, that is what it is. That is the actual thing, not the performance of connection, but the real use of it. Bringing the actual hard thing to the table and working through it together, without either of you disappearing behind what you think you are supposed to say. Theo told me a few weeks later that she had mentioned me to their mother, that she had been specific about it. She had not been specific about anyone in a long time, he said. And he said it in the tone of someone who understood the significance of that and wanted me to understand it too. In February, she came to the house one evening without calling ahead. She had done that twice before, and both times I had come to understand that it meant she had decided something and needed to say it directly, without giving herself time to reconsider. She sat down at the kitchen table. She looked at the shelf by the window, at the amber jar sitting there in the same place it had been since August. "You really kept it," she said. "I told you I did. I know. She looked at it for a moment. "I thought maybe you had been overstating it a little." "I do not overstate things." "No." A pause. "I am learning that." She looked at me. "I keep waiting for you to be different than you appear to be. To do the thing that explains the gap between what you seem like and what is actually true." "There is no gap," I said. "I know." She said it quietly. "That is the thing I am still getting used to." I spent 3 years looking for what was underneath with Daniel. With you, the surface is what is real. I do not have to look for what is underneath because it is all right there. I keep forgetting that is allowed. I said, "It is allowed." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "Can I have the honey?" I said, "It was always yours." She got up and crossed to the shelf and picked up the jar. Held it in both hands for a moment, turning it slowly, looking at the amber color of it against the window light. Then she walked back to the shelf and set it down exactly where it had been. "No," she said. "It stays here." She looked at me with those steady dark eyes, and what I saw in them was different than it had been at the coffee table, different than it had been at the market, different than it had been in every careful and measured thing she had said and done since October. Not from careful to careless, from careful to chosen. The decision made and placed somewhere quiet and permanent, where it did not need to be announced. I did not say anything. She did not say anything. There are moments that do not need more words once they have settled, that only need someone to stay in the room and not perform their way out of it. I stayed. The jar is still on the shelf. It has been there a year and a half now. She fills it at the start of every new season, pours a little from the first batch into it and seals it back, so it is never quite empty and never quite full. She did not tell me she was going to do that. She just did it one morning last spring, brought a new batch over, came into the kitchen while I was making coffee, and I turned around and looked at the shelf and saw it had been refilled. I did not say anything. She handed me a cup and sat down at the table and we read the Sunday paper, and the whole morning was ordinary in the very best sense of the word. I spent most of my 30s learning that the cost of pretending is not the performance itself. The performance is just work. The real cost is what goes missing while you are doing it. The honest look that you redirect. The sentence that is true that you replace with something easier. The moment you are so busy appearing a certain way that you fail to actually be in the moment at all. A woman at the Natchitoches farmers market told me on a Saturday in October that I was supposed to look away. I told her I had quit pretending long ago. What she did not know then, and what she knows now, because I told her, because that is how I do things, is that standing there and looking was the first completely honest thing I had done in a long time. I knew it when it was happening. And I was not going to pretend it was anything other than what it was. She did not know that then. She knows it now, somewhere between those two moments, in the quiet that opens up when two people stop performing and start just being what they actually are. Something real grew without being asked to. Without being managed or strategized or dressed up to look like something else. It grew because we gave it honest ground to grow in. Some people spend their whole lives looking for the thing they already know how to feel. They perform around it and beside it and instead of it. And they call that being careful. And sometimes it is. And sometimes it is just the longest way around a thing that was always right there. I quit the long way around. I looked. She caught me, and neither of us pretended it was anything other than what it was.